Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to our session on sustainability in the age of digital disruption. During this virtual event, we will be hearing opinions on this topic from senior leadership of ESSEC Business School, Singapore Economic Development Board, Bizsu, as well as Sphere. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Valentina Koh with the Singapore Global Network, or SGN for short. To begin with, let me tell you a bit about SGN. We are a division of the Singapore Economic Development Board. Our mission is to build a global network of awesome people with any links to Singapore, and we are here to facilitate the flow of ideas, thought leadership, talent, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So in line with that, we have organized this pertinent workshop today with our partners, ESSEC and French Chambers of Commerce, Singapore. ESSEC Asia Pacific aims to nurture a new generation of global leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals who are able to face the challenges of a fast-changing world. And the French Chambers of Commerce in Singapore is a non-profit association established in 1979 that promotes mutually beneficial trade relations between Singapore and France. Thank you to our partners for joining us in making this event happen. So some quick house rules before we begin. To ensure a fantastic experience for all, your microphones have been muted. However, we would still love to have your questions. So please submit them via the Q&A function. And should your question be directed to a particular panelist, please indicate that out when typing out your question. While we may not be able to take everyone's questions today, we will definitely try our best. Now, let's kickstart the masterclass with a quick introduction of our expert speaker. Arijit Chatterjee is Associate Professor of Management at ESSEC and the Academic Director of the Asian Strategic Consulting Project. Today, Professor Arijit will be sharing with us the grand challenge of sustainability and how we need innovation and restraint to achieve sustainability. Please take it away, Professor.
Thanks, Valentina. Can you hear me?
Yes, all good, Professor.
Okay, great. Let me share my slides. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I hope all of you can hear me well. My name is Arijit Chatterjee. Thanks for inviting me. I have 20 minutes to talk about, it's a mouthful, right? Sustainability in the age of digital disruption. Now, I have a few slides and I will walk you through. This is what I have in mind, these 5 things. Why it needs our urgent attention, what is a grand challenge. I'll talk about digital and it's a tool, not an end in itself. I'll talk about scope 3 emissions and finally the triple bottom line. You know, it is going to be a monologue for 20 minutes, but please submit your Q&A and we can talk about those questions later. Now, why it needs our urgent attention is because time is running out. Any of you, if you have followed, you know, the COP26 and the discussions there, and following, you know, the recurring news on various channels about, you know, how more rainfall, you know, more wildfires, more cyclones. So it is, we are living it as we speak. If you think of, you know, the carbon budget, which is, you know, we are allowed to have only so much gigatons of carbon dioxide, okay? If you look at the left graphic, if we were to keep our temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, then we only have 420 gigatons of CO2 left to emit, you know, emissions. That's the emissions we should be allowed if we want to retain the temperature increase to only 1.5 degrees Celsius, which it seems it is unlikely, okay? And you can see progressively as we keep on compromising, if it is 1.7 degrees Celsius, then we have 770 gigatons. And if it is 2 degrees Celsius, it is 1,270 gigatons. So these, and you know, this is the good thing about, the good thing about all of this is it doesn't depend on the opinions of human beings. This is physics and chemistry. So it doesn't matter, it doesn't depend on my interpretation or my opinion. Okay, this is just physics and chemistry. So if this happens, this will happen. The IPCC, in its close to 4,000 page report, it says these very stark things, which is the CO2 concentration is highest in at least 2 million years. Sea levels are rising in the fastest rates in at least the last 2,000 years. Arctic Sea, we keep reading these things, right? And watching those videos of huge chunks of ice falling off, sometimes from the Arctic, sometimes from Antarctica, lowest level in at least 1,000 years. And glaciers are retreating the last 2,000 years. Okay, so these are unprecedented data. And, whatever we are doing, it is reaching to the depths of oceans, and plastic we have found in the placenta of pregnant women as well. So it is really, really scary. Okay, and all of this, the climate change, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail, is this is made by humans. Okay, and the consequences are being borne not only by humans but by non-human species. Okay, I'll not walk you through the cause and effect from this pictorial, but you can see that there are feedback loops, and those are really scary because those are very difficult to predict. For example, if the permafrost in Siberia it melts, then it will release methane in the atmosphere that will aggravate, the greenhouse gas effect. So what we are staring at, and why we should pay urgent attention to this, is we are looking at more heat deaths, hunger, economic collapse, unbreathable air, climate conflicts, wildfire, freshwater drain, dying oceans, and drowning. And if any of us we are thinking that this is the future, this is not the future. We are in the middle of it. Okay, the whole you must recall, the picture of the small child from the Syrian immigrant family, face down on the seashore. That's because of the Syrian drought. Okay, the entire ISIS is a direct consequence of the Syrian drought. So moving on, so these are the pictures. This is again my IPCC report. We are looking at extreme heat, heavy rainfall, drought, very, very extreme weather conditions, and oceans, which are actually, out of sight, so they're out of mind. But ocean acidification is a very, very serious issue. So here are some questions. How many mass extinctions Earth has experienced? Why did they happen? So far we have seen 5 mass extinctions. We have seen, means in record, there are 5 mass extinctions, almost wiping out the fossil records. Out of those 5, 4 have happened, except for the one which had the dinosaurs go away. All 4 happened because of greenhouse gases. Okay, and the only unique thing this time is that the greenhouse effect is caused by human activities. How many climate refugees will be there by the year 2050? Well, the World Bank says 140 million by 2050. The Syrian refugee crisis was triggered by 1 million refugees, and we're talking of 140 million. The UN says 200 million. How many of the world's vertebrae have died in the last 40 years? More than 50%, according to the World Wildlife Fund. Okay, so you know, I mean, I don't know if those of you who are hearing knew all this information, but if we did not know, then it is even more scary that we should know that this is what we are staring at. So sustainability is a grand challenge. Okay, and what I mean by that, what is a grand challenge? A grand challenge, you know, it affects large populations. Okay, millions of people, and not a few thousand. Okay, the SARS crisis that happened, you know, years ago, it had affected about 8,000 people. Okay, and here we're talking about millions of people. Okay, grand challenge does not have a solution. You know, the word grand challenge originated in mathematics, that how could somebody solve a particular math problem, and those were thought of as, I mean, those were discrete and tractable, right? But the kind of societal grand challenges we're talking about, they don't have a solution. Okay, so they can be mitigated, they can be addressed, they can be sort of controlled, but not solved as such. Okay, and some also say that these are what we call wicked problems. What are wicked problems? Wicked problems have multiple causes, information is confusing, and the impact of interventions can only be found after some time. You know, unlike sports, for example, the reason why we love soccer, we find the impact right there, right, after a few seconds, after split seconds. But here, the interventions will be, impact of the intervention will be found after some time. So what are the, so these are, if you think of, if you ask me that, you know, give me an example of a grand challenge, so I cannot give any better example than the 17 global goals from the UN. Okay, so you can read them off the screen, you can search online, but these are the 17 grand challenges identified by the UN. Okay, and you can see climate action. The one I'm talking about right now is box number 13, bottom left. Okay, and you'll see that in the next picture, I'll show you that how all of these, you know, the 17 goals, they are linked in complex ways. Okay, they are not watertight compartments that, you know, if somebody can take care of let's say reduced inequalities, then it doesn't have any effect on the others. Okay, so this is a pictorial from, you know, a workshop I did, the climate fresque. I'll talk about it in a minute, but if you follow it, and it's too small on the screen, but I'll read them out from the left to the right. See, it starts with human activities. Okay, then there's what are the activities? Agriculture, building, transport, industries. What happens is we burn fossil fuels, we do deforestation. Aerosols are nothing but, you know, particles, pollution, and that has an effect on CO2 emissions. The CO2 that is emitted, it sinks into where does it go? It goes into the atmosphere, it goes into land, it goes into the oceans. Okay, now if the CO2 increases, CO2 is one of the greenhouse gases. The other greenhouse gases are water vapor, or nitrous oxide, methane. What happens is, if there is more CO2 in the atmosphere, and by the way, you know, we need greenhouse gases. If there were no greenhouse gases, then the world, Earth would be very cold. You know, I think 33 degrees Celsius cold, and we would not survive. But if it is more, then what we are staring at is global warming. Additional greenhouse gas effects lead to radiative forcing, which is every second we are receiving some energy from the sun, and part of that is reflected away. But if there is an imbalance, then what happens is it imbalances the energy budget of the earth, and the consequences are temperature rise of the land, of the water, glaciers melt, ice caps melt, sea ice melts. And when that happens, it leads to heat waves, the water cycle. When the surface temperature of the oceans increases, and also the surface temperature of the land increases, then we see the water cycle gets disrupted. We see more rainfall, okay, more unpredictable, more intense cyclones. So river flooding, all of that. If glaciers melt, if ice caps melt, then sea level will rise. You'll see that how these cause and effect diagram has feedback loops. It's very, very sort of the causality is quite complex. It leads to forest fires, vectors of disease, it's more insects, freshwater resources will dwindle. That will result in declining agricultural yields, and ultimately what began with humans, the consequences again are on humans, because we don't really care about other species, right? So it has what results is climate refugees, famine, human health, and God forbid, armed conflicts. Okay, so this is the picture, and what's interesting is, this entire diagram, it is free of ideology. It is physics and chemistry, okay, except for the last part, the last 4 boxes. The rest of it is science. So if you look at the IPCC report, which is again 4,000 pages, but if you want to sort of do a quick workshop on that without reading those 4,000 pages, I would strongly recommend, the Climate Fresk. You can send an email there to singapore@climatefresk.org, and I'm sure you will learn a lot about the science of climate change. As I said, it is devoid of ideology. It's just pure science. So that's why the IPCC report starts with, I think the title is the basis of based on physical sciences, something like that. Okay, so that's climate change for you. So you can see that it begins with humans and the consequences on humans, and that's where the social factor comes in. So now comes digital. Now, if you see that both this climate change and digital, these two things have gone totally global. Okay, so some people think that the digital optimists, and coming from a business school, we have to be optimists, right? I mean, we cannot go home after the analysis. We have to do something, and they think that digital will solve the problem. Okay, technologies. Now, technology is not a person, and it's like, whether money is good or bad. Okay, it is neither good nor bad. It depends on how you use the money. Same with digital. It is not a tool. It is not an end in itself. It is a tool. Okay, so carbon footprint, just to give you some examples, user devices, data centers, networks, TV, they account for about 1.4 billion tons of CO2. Okay, greenhouse gas emissions. The phone, apart from its usage, there is carbon embodied in the device itself. Okay, energy consumption, e-waste dumping in distant shores is a big problem. If you can do your own search on Google, you'll see what's happening in China, in Ghana, in Thailand, in parts of India, mostly where there is people would want to sort of send it away to distant shores. And carbon intensive crypto mining. This is something that I have some pictures on, some graphs on, to see that Bitcoin mining, it consumes enormous amounts of energy. Okay, and if you want to track it, so there is this Cambridge Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index. You'll see that the estimation, the middle one, it shows about 135 terawatt hours annual. Okay. Now, if you plot the solar power generation, which is a good thing, right? The solar power generated from the US is 132 terawatt hours, which means that all the Bitcoin people, they have negated all the good work done by the people in the US who used solar panels. Okay, so as an individual, you might think that, okay, that, you know, I'm being a good Samaritan. I've put on a solar panel to heat my water, or, you know, to for the air conditioner. But somebody somewhere is doing some Bitcoin mining, which is negating all that effort. Okay, but at the same time, you know, carbon footprint can be mitigated by digital. And examples are, you know, for example, what we are doing right now is video conferencing, right? So we haven't traveled, we are where we are, you know, and that actually reduces a huge amount of carbon intensive travel. Okay. Efficient water management in agriculture. Agriculture is one of those activities, human activities, that consumes the most amount of water. Okay, not the water we use for bathing or cleaning our clothes, or you know, in the restaurants. More than 75% of the water is used for agriculture. Okay, so that can be efficiently managed by using digital technologies. Blockchain, not for mining cryptocurrency, but for tracking supply chains, for example. I'll talk about that in a minute when I talk of scope 3 emissions. I'm running out of time. And also information sharing, which is very useful. You know, so digital is a catalyst for information sharing, what we are doing right now. Now here is another graph. You see the amount of energy used for Bitcoin mining. You see that darker it is, the more. And you see amount of Bitcoin mining going on in China in June 2021. The darkest part in the map. But after 1 month, just by one regulation, when China banned all Bitcoin mining, it suddenly went, it became all okay, right? So regulation can do wonders. Okay, just wanted to highlight that. So how might innovation work? Innovation can work by investing in disruptive technology, by knowledge spillovers, and also we need restraint. Restraint can work by regulation, peer pressure, moral purpose. Okay. And if you want to find out what is your carbon footprint, you can go to that website and you can figure out, you know, the limit we should have is 2 tons per person. I think in Singapore it is 7 tons or 8 tons on an average. In the US it is much more. Scope 3 emissions, I'll go a bit faster now. So scope 3 emissions are all those emissions that are there in, which are not accounted for, okay, in the supply chains. Employee commute, your investments, you know, the transportation, the food that you eat, how far it has traveled from, the waste, all of that, okay. And that consumes about more than, I think, 90% of the emissions, which we don't want to account for. 15 categories, you can do that search, but that's something very, very crucial, okay. But it is not yet mandated. So when people account for carbon emissions, they just don't want to stare at scope 3, okay. I'll move on the slides because I have run out of time. So for example, you know, when you eat the food, we look at how much carb, how much protein, how much fat, some of us who are very, very health conscious. But scope 3 would want to look at what happens after you eat. And, you know, from where does the metals that's in the laptop come from? Okay. So instead of take, make, dispose, it's about, you know, the source and the sink. Okay. Both. That's scope 3 emissions. Okay, so what needs to be done is, you know, all of these things: new metrics, politics and regulation, new opportunities, allocate funds for R&D, new certifications, innovation and restraint. Okay, Finally, the triple bottom line, what is to be sustained? Profit, planet, and people. All three. So that's the hard part. And for that, I'm eager to hear from our panelists. But even employees are now speaking out. This Amazon Employees for Climate Justice. We should all read more, get access to critical thought. This is also about the nature of corporations, which are legal personalities. But I think in New Zealand, a few years ago, one river was given legal personality so that it could fight for itself. Well, it could not, it needs representatives. So here are some books. I'll be finished in a few seconds. So we all need actions that have multiple payoffs. We need profits, we need people, we need planet. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you. Sorry, went over by 2 minutes.
No problem, but thank you so much for that, Professor. It was definitely super insightful for all of us. I'd like to now invite Singapore Economic Development Board's Regional Director for Europe, Marianne Tan, to share with us about Singapore's 2030 Green Plan. Thank you so much, Marianne.
Thanks, Valentina. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marianne, the Regional Director for the Singapore Economic Development Board's Paris office. Many thanks to the Singapore Global Network as well as ESSEC for your kind invitation to share about Singapore's sustainability initiatives with our audience today. So sustainability, it's a big word, right? It's like Prosit, it's multifaceted, it's a grand challenge. So what I aim to do in the next 5 minutes is not to be comprehensive about everything that we're doing in this aspect, but instead to give you a flavor of Singapore's approach and some of the things that we have started to do. So next slide, please. You might know that thinking about sustainable development is not new to Singapore. And in fact, it's something that we have pursued since our independence by balancing economic growth with environmental protection and social inclusion. The Garden City as a vision is quite famous, but then did you also know that we had the 1971 Clean Air Act, sorry, with its stringent pollution controls, which is another example of Singapore's early actions to not just industrialize at the expense of the environment. So the Green Plan that was announced last year is a continuation of this effort to ensure that Singapore remains a green and livable home, and to also frame the problematic in such a way that gives clarity to the different initiatives and empowers people to act. It's important to highlight that the Green Plan is not a one-time effort. It is a long-term and living plan which will evolve as Singapore develops and refines its strategies. So the Green Plan addresses sustainability through 5 lenses: city in nature, sustainable living, energy reset, green economy, and resilient future. And there are 2 key enablers here, which are green government and green citizenry. So today I will focus on 3 elements: the energy reset, green economy, and green citizenry. Next slide, please. First, the energy reset, which is how we're going to change our energy sources to cleaner sources, but also at the same time work on energy efficiency. So in terms of energy sources, over 90% of our electricity needs today are currently met by natural gas. And while this is already the cleanest fossil fuel there is, so we don't have the option of switching from coal as Europe is doing, there's still more we can do in order to meet our decarbonization targets. So what we're doing is to tap on low carbon clean electricity imports, for which the Energy Market Authority has launched a request for proposals in November last year. And in another aspect of energy sources is that Singapore being a major shipping hub, we are looking at the use of sustainable fuels for international trade and travel. So this is in line with the IMO's target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping by over 50% by 2050, using 2008 as a baseline, and to phase out such emissions in this century. So to achieve this target, the MPA has actually set up a global center for maritime decarbonization to facilitate decarbonization technology development and test bidding. The other major aspect of the energy reset is energy efficiency. And for this, we have set a target of having at least 80% of new buildings to be super low energy buildings and to have 80% improvement in energy efficiency for best-in-class green buildings by 2030 under the BCA's Green Mark program. Next slide, please. The second element is green economy, where we are seeking to transform our industry's production and energy usage while seeking also opportunities for sustainability to anchor new investments that improve carbon and energy efficiency. So for example, by working with our industrial companies, such as the ones on Jurong Island, to improve their energy efficiency, but also growing new sectors like carbon services and green finance that also act as enablers for sustainable projects to happen. And another aspect is research and development, where we are looking to attract companies to develop new sustainability solutions, trial new technologies for things like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and also looking at things like studying the potential of low carbon hydrogen. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to touch on green citizenry, and because it is really important that every individual, household, and organization all play their part. So what the government is going to do is we will work across the public, private, and people sectors as part of a continuous national engagement process. So this could be working through citizen work groups, looking at proposals submitted for the SG Eco Fund, for which 50 million Singapore dollars has been set aside, and generating new ideas and views from the Green Plan conversations. So as I said at the start of the presentation, the Green Plan is a living initiative that will evolve as Singapore develops and refines its strategies. And you as an individual or as a company with solutions, you can take part in this as well. And I would really encourage everyone to have a look at the Green Plan website, where the entire plan is detailed, but also more importantly, what they have mapped out there is to suggest the different ways that people can participate in this initiative. Yeah. So thanks very much for your time and happy to take questions after this.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And thank you for sharing how our green city is going to get a whole lot greener. So as we move to our panel discussion, I'd like to introduce our other two panelists that will be joining us. We have the General Manager of Bizsu, Brice, joining us. Brice is a French serial entrepreneur dedicated to improving the environment. Thank you, Brice, for joining us, and please share a little more with the audience about Bizsu and your views on sustainability.
Hi, everyone. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. And so what we do at Bizsu is that we help companies embrace sustainability in a profitable way. And the way we do it is by supplying solutions that are innovative, that are cost-effective, and that are sustainable, so good for the environment. And I would like to mention a bit more, like how it started, like why we are doing what we are doing. And I graduated from ESSEC in 2015. I'm an ESSEC alumnus. And at that time, we were already talking about about sustainability and climate change at ESSEC, but it wasn't really my thing. I wasn't really into it. And the year after, I moved to Thailand, where I had my first startup. And so Professor Arijit mentioned about Thailand, and he got a bit the same. I got the same thoughts, basically, where I arrived there and I realized there was a big issue with waste. But when you are there, you see that there is a big issue with waste. And I started to research on how was waste managed and treated, and it was actually much darker than what I thought. And then I started to look at solutions, and I looked at the work from Gunther Polly, for example, in blue economy, and I started to find tons of solutions that many people don't know about and that we don't really hear in the news. And this is what made me think that what I was doing was good, but it will be much more impactful to work for the environment, and that my next startup will be for the environment. That will be helping the environment to get better. And so at that time, I realized also three things. I mean, I realized three things also along the way after my initial thoughts. Is that first, money is always in the game. It's not just we have solutions that are good for their environment and we will adopt them. Money is always in the game. Another part is that when we have solutions that are too hard to implement, it's also it doesn't really work. So we need things that are very easy to implement. So that's the second thing. Third thing is that it has to be quite innovative. Well, we talk here about innovation in a digital era, and nowadays the solutions that we bring need to be innovative. And number four is that if we want people to move on, we shouldn't point fingers at people. We shouldn't talk about the bad things that we do. We shouldn't talk about how better we gotta be. We need to inspire. We need to inspire by showing solutions. And this is what made me started. And I believe that this is what we should all do, basically. It's talk about solutions that exist. And this is what we want to do with Bizsu. So at Bizsu, our goal is to propose solutions that are innovative, profitable, and easy to implement. And then another thing is, what are the big issues that we have in Singapore? Where what we looked at is that aircon is an issue where we can all see it. Aircon is estimated to represent 30% of Singapore CO2 emissions. It's estimated. And we can see that it's not fully optimum. Often when we are in offices, we have some people with blankets. We have some aircon everywhere, and it's more and more expensive. And so what we do is that we distribute an aircon solution that is called Continuum. It's coming from Japan. It's patented and it's natural. And this is, to me, the most important part, because in nature, there is no waste. There is no waste. When you go in a forest, there is no bin, there is no waste. And at the same time, one solution in nature can solve many problems. And this is exactly what our solution does, is that it will help us to save on average 25% energy on air conditioning, up to 50%. It will help us to make the temperature more even everywhere. It will improve air quality. It's very simple to implement, and it can live for a lifetime. So basically, that's a no-brainer. And that's a no-brainer because also we can bring it to companies in a way that they don't need to invest anything. So thanks to this, we want to save 1 million tons of CO2 within 5 years.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brice, for sharing so much about yourself, about
My
Bizsu.
pleasure.
Thank you so much. So alongside Brice, we also have Erwan, who is the CEO of Sphere Group on the panel. Erwan is an entrepreneur in various industries and a strong advocate for sustainability and the circular economy in the FMCG market. So thank you for joining us today, Erwan, and please share a little bit more with the audience about Sphere Group and the work that you're doing very quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Just a slight precision. I'm the CEO of Asia for the Sphere Group. Sphere Group is a conglomerate of 15 factories. We operate mostly in the plastic industry, so we are very much concerned, and we are very much in the middle of all these discussions about sustainability. And on top of that, our main market is the consumer market, and we have for the past decade now been one of the main innovator in this industry by bringing on solutions that were home compostable. So we have managed to replace most of our range by home compostable products. We are fully integrated from the raw material to the finished product, and even more so for the past few years now, because we are also involved in the afterlife of our products. We are very much into this, I would say, global thinking and this teamwork that is necessary to tackle some of the issues of the sustainability today. Specifically to our work on the afterlife of product, we are closely working with some NGOs or with some other industries for the waste management. We have different way to look at the waste management because a sustainable product might not be a compostable product sometimes. Sometimes it has to be a fossil origin product. But the way we manage its afterlife is the key to answer the, I would say, sustainability problem, the sustainability strategy. Sorry. So yeah, happy to share with you the way we can think it through all together, because indeed, and this would be my personal belief, sustainability is a matter of being considerate for the others. We don't get things done if we are not working on solutions together. Being in the FMCG business, I know so much about what marketing can do to damage the sustainability, at the same point what marketing can do to help it. So we could go through some of these later on, but we have to consider that the global perception of what we're talking today, indeed, as it was mentioned in introduction, is not a single problem that we need to address. We have several issues along the way that we need to consider. And one of them, and one of the key, would be us as consumers. The other point that we could look at today is specifically for Singapore. Indeed, we have the Green Deal going on today for Singapore, and but in the public, we hear a lot of questions about what do we do on the consumer good, and mostly the plastic bags. And this could be something that could be addressed easily as well, because again, I will put an emphasis on that. Compostable is a solution, but not always. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Awan, for your quick introduction. Thank you to Brice and Marianne for joining us today as well. So now we'll move on to the panel section, and we'll have Professor Arijit moderate this exemplary panel with everybody. Professor, please take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Valentina. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you for the introductions and what you do, Brice, Irwan, and Marian. I have a few questions, and let me start off with Irwan, because you are the last. So let me just ask you a question. It is, from what you said, it seems that you are saying that sustainability is not just an environmental matter; it is a social matter, right? Um, uh, and if you look at, uh, packaging, it is we have seen the pictures, right? I mean, they're everywhere, right? And what you are doing is great. This is something really, really useful for consumers. um, Now, thinking of it as a social matter, do you think that we need to sort of make people aware, or do you think that there is also a need to have stringent regulations?
Well, yes, indeed. First answer, yes, indeed, it is a social matter. Everybody needs to be aware of what's going on, because as a consumer, we rarely see the impact of our consumption from the beginning or to the end. I mean, as a huge traveler visiting a lot of factories, I can see the impact from the origin and the impact at the end when I am a tourist. So yes, it is a social matter for all those reasons, because we have to communicate more about the supply chain and the way the supply chain works, for people to understand that whatever you order online or whatever you pick up from the shelves has an impact on the entire things that we're talking about today. It's very difficult to have a sense of it if you are not working in that industry, and that I can understand. Therefore, I come to the next point. Yes, we need more communication, and the communication needs to be more targeted, with, I would say, more stronger images of what's the impact of what we order. And in your presentation, you were mentioning the label on the food products, where you can see how much fat you get, etc., etc. Now, let's think that if the labeling on our packaging, for example, would show the same. And I'm not saying that we're shaming the consumer, but we have to make them understand that whatever they take off the shelf has an impact. Now, to move to the third step, yes, regulation is a must. And we can see it between Europe and Asia, for example, where Europe, in the compostability of some of the packaging, has moved on a lot of regulations, and they are at some point now very much advanced in how much renewable product we shall use, etc., etc. And the aftermath as well is taken into account more and more now. Whereas in Asia, a lot of countries have moved on with the NGO impulse, and it's rather difficult to make the populations moving with just only I would say, a goodwill from NGOs. It needs to be backed up by stringent regulations that can be fined at some point, because otherwise the interest or the personal interests of people will take the lead. Right. On our way to
thanks, everyone. Yes, so basically, because there isn't much time to make, one fine morning, all the consumers will be aware, and there'll be a new dawn. I mean, there is no time for that. So that's the problem. So Marian, just a question for you. I was really very, very interesting. Singapore has always taken the lead in all these the government in Singapore has taken many innovative, programs historically. So the one that talked about promoting sustainable fuels for international trade, that was interesting because it directly addresses the scope 3 emissions. I mean, I can stay in a green building, but actually, I'm doing soybean trading that's actually totally destroying the rainforest in Brazil. So the green building I'm operating from doesn't really matter much. So that's why, the sustainable fuels and international trade is so interesting. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, sustainable fuels is it's something that's been going on for some time, right? So I think I'll answer this in two aspects. I spoke a little bit about maritime fuels just now, which the MPA is addressing through their Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization. And air is also quite interesting because, so if you look at the planes today, and planes don't get developed overnight, right? So you have projects that are looking at planes that use alternative fuels. For example, I believe Airbus is working on a plane that will use hydrogen, but that is something more in the future. But we cannot wait till that is developed in order to start acting. So we are taking steps already. And today, the most immediately viable step we can take is to explore the use of sustainable aviation fuels. So in fact, Changi Airport is going to be starting a pilot this year where they will start using SAF at the airport. And why it's a pilot and not something that we're jumping in? Because we need to study things like the costs, the potential pricing structures, and see how future policy is going to be shaped. So like Erwan said, regulation is a part of it, but I think regulation needs to be shaped with a lot of thoughtfulness in order not to have unintended consequences. And I mean, for example, sustainable aviation fuels today is made using waste oils. So then we also need to look at the supply chain of waste oils. Is there even enough waste oils all around the world? Because if everyone starts directing waste oils to sustainable aviation fuels, that's great. But then if you start setting a target that it's way above what we can actually supply, then how do we deal with that? So I think we need to think very carefully, start with small pilots, start with small test beds as we have for maritime as well, in order to evolve the policies as we go. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Mariam. Really, you mentioned unintended consequences. So those are really very, very difficult to sort of preempt before. A quick question for Brice. Brice, you talked about, you are distributing a patented Japanese product that will lower the energy usage in air conditions, right? So what I see is that your business is about distributing for this product, in particular about distributing this product in Malaysia and Singapore. You're exclusive distributors, right, for this product?
That's right.
That's an interesting business model. So you have a green product which reduces energy, and then you want to diffuse it, distribute it so that people adopt it, right?
Exactly.
So is that the plan? So do you have other products in the pipeline that you have identified and you want to sort of spread them in the region?
Well, the way we think is we are thinking like hummingbirds. So there is a story with hummingbirds that says we are in a forest and there is a big fire in the forest, and all the animals are living because there is a big fire, and there is the hummingbird going on and off of the forest, go to the sea to pick some water and bring it to put some water on the fire and try to stop it. And all the animals look at the hummingbird and they say, but you hummingbirds, what are you doing? You think you will stop the fire just by yourself? And the Urbane Bird says, no, but at least I have done my part. And this is how we think in terms of climate change, is that we want to do our part to tackle climate change. And the way we believe we should do it, the way we want to do it, is by providing innovative solutions that will help us to save energy and to be more sustainable. So I'm glad you mentioned climate risk earlier, Professor Arijit, because climate risk is also one thing that we distribute, and I mean it's also one thing that we do for companies. It's one solution that we provide, and we are glad that ESSEC and the French Chamber of Commerce also adopted it and really enjoyed it, and because we believe that it's a way to learn about causes and consequences in a fun way, in a cheap and fun way. When it's fun, we also learn better and we learn faster. And so other things that we are providing is also workshops like climate risk, and then other solutions, but I don't want to tell more about it now because it's ongoing.
Thanks, Brice. Erwan, a quick question for you. Because you are into this sustainable packaging, right? And I'm sure a lot of R&D goes on in your company, right? We need new materials, right? Which consume less fossil fuel, which are biodegradable. So do you think companies are spending enough money on R&D?
Well, yeah, indeed. The packaging is let's put it in the big picture of the marketing. So yes, they spend enough money on the packaging. When it comes to R&D to make the packaging, and I see a question about the packaging in Europe, for example, coming up. So we will answer that. Yes, there's a lot of marketing. I would say blah blah today on we have 100% recycled plastic bottles, and this is from whatever industries, etc. Or our plastic bottles are recyclable, etc. The whole thing about it is to think of one, do we have exactly what we need for the content that we need to package? I take the example of the detergent. Most of the time, the detergent are packed in large bottles because it gives the impression to the consumer that he has a lot compared to the competitors. But in fact, big bottles contains the same amount of liquid than others. Everyone remembers even the powder, the big barrels made of paper were 1/4 empty on the top. So we are transporting air, which means that we are causing CO2 emission just for air transport. We are not efficiently loading our containers because this air takes space and more space that we would like, et cetera, et cetera. So it all adds up. Now, do we have ways to tackle it? Yes, we do. Again, it takes up to the big players to understand or to agree to work on a less aggressive marketing from this standpoint, like trying to sell what's not existing, and being more efficient in the way they are packaging things. On our side, there's also another way that we can answer that is not only we provide the packaging, but we provide a solution that comes after on how we are going to handle the management of these waste. And this also is not something that us as one industry can answer. We need to answer that with the distributors, with the waste management companies, with the local authorities, et cetera, et cetera. It's aim to be played with all the actors. Not alone we can do that. So once again, we can answer a consumer request, but we must think of the aftermath, and we are not the only one who can answer it. We need everybody around the table.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. How much time we have? We have about 9 minutes left. So, quick question for Brice. So, you know, this material that you are retrofitting. So it is for new machines and old machines, right? Both.
Yes.
Now, you know, I mean, if you think overall, you know, I mean, this is about overall carbon footprint. So if you are doing it in existing buildings, then you are reducing the carbon footprint, existing, you know, recurring ones. But if for the growth of your business, you would need more and more buildings, and that would actually not address the real problem. But so in terms of convincing your customers, whether the B2B or B2C, have you been able to convince customers to use the product? I mean, this is something, I don't know, it's a personal question or not, but something about your company's success. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. Well, it's we bring solutions that are innovative, very simple, and profitable. So for companies, it's a no-brainer, right? It's literally a no-brainer. And we started 2 years ago, and we have been, I would say, fortunate enough to be able to work with some big companies in Singapore. So KPL, it's one of them. Capitaland, it's one of them. We actually launched a new website today when you can see some details about what we have been doing with Capitaland, what we are doing with Capitaland, and then we also focus on not only I would say real estate or buildings, but also other type of companies that do not fully think about reducing their energy as a primary source of business. So Food Panda, for example, is one of our clients as well, a company like Bolloré, because in warehouses we can also help to save a lot of energy. And another way as well that we are another type of companies that we are helping. I mean, other types are schools and hotels, because as we also improve air quality, it has basically different type of support, right? And so basically, yeah, we are able to work with quite big clients. Luckily, I almost would like to say, in Singapore.
Thanks, Brice.
Welcome.
We have 5 more minutes, I think. So, question from Marianne. Do you think there is any plan, a part of the green plan, to make Singaporeans more aware of their buying behavior? For example, let's say I go to cold storage, or I go to Sheng Siong or Fair Price, and I like something, take it off the shelf, but then I must be aware that how far it has traveled, you know, not just the carb and the protein and the fat, but how much is the carbon footprint of the product to appear on the shelf. There are things like that. I ask because, you know, often Singapore is seen as a progressive region in terms of, you know, thinking ahead of others. Such policies can cascade to other regions, other cities.
Yeah, and I think Erwan alluded to it earlier. So definitely the idea of making information more available so that people can make more informed decisions, that is definitely desirable. So Singapore actually has some of these schemes already. So green mark, okay, that pertains to buildings, but it's one example. The other one I can think of is the energy labels that we see on electrical appliances. So that measures electrical consumption. So, you know, you have 4 ticks, that's great. You have 1 tick, that means it's not the most efficient. It shapes consumer behavior. When it comes to something like supply chain, so the idea is desirable. I think what the devil is in the details, right? Because it's about getting together that information and ensuring that the information is accurate and reliable so that there is trust and credibility in the scheme. And as you know, today's supply chains are extremely complicated. So you have, let's say, I don't know, you go to cold storage and you buy a piece of chicken. So which farm does this chicken come from? How was it shipped to Singapore? What was the supply chain looking like? All these are things that you have to take into consideration. So I think having that credible implementation is key. And you probably have to ask someone like the Singapore Food Agency or the National Environment Agency whether it's something that they're looking at. But I think the idea is desirable, but we need to implement it in a credible way.
Yeah, thanks, Marian. I think the supply chain is enormously complex. I think it is in pharma, for example. You know, I mean, how many times one product before it is in our hands, it has traveled around the globe. In such cases, I think blockchain can work wonders. So we can actually use digital to the purpose that we want to achieve. Okay. Question for should we move on to the questions that we see, because I see lots of questions in the Q&A.
Yeah, Professor, definitely. You can move on to a question from the live Q&A. So thank you for, the interesting discussion. So let's move on to the Q&A, and Professor and our panelists may answer the questions from our audience. Please take it away.
Thanks, Valentina. So I'll just answer I see first 2 questions, and then I'll let Erwan, Marian, and Brice answer some of the others. So first of all, the question from Florian: despite most topics being interconnected, if there's one single measure or regulation you could implement immediately to have the highest impact, what would you choose? Now, I would not choose a single measure. Okay, I think that's why I had the word grand challenge in one of my slides. Grand challenges have multiple causes. Okay, so there is no silver bullet, and no policymaker or no CEO must be choosing one particular thing, and there has to be multiple efforts in many different directions. Okay, I think if you follow Buddhism, the Pratita Samutpada says cause and effect rise together, right? Dependent origination. The cause of death is birth, right? The cause of like that. So if we stop all activity, then global warming would go away, but that's not possible, right? So there has to be efforts on multiple fronts. There is, I don't think a single regulation can work. So, but if you follow the discussion in the COP26, the discussion has been on energy, because it directly has an effect on fossil fuels, and which generates CO2, right? And that is the largest greenhouse gas. But it is enormously complex, because I think there was a question about politics and science from somebody, because who is going to curb their emissions, right? So the debate in COP26 is usually between the early polluters of Europe and US and the late polluters of Asia. Okay. Now the late polluters will say, well, you got rich by burning fossil fuels. why should we now? We also want to be rich. So now, so there is this whole discussion about climate justice, right? And if you ask, I mean, the poor countries of developing economies, you must curb your consumption. That would be cruel, because how less can somebody consume? Then they will die, because children don't have fresh water to drink. They don't have enough food to eat. And somebody in from a rich country is saying, that thinking about the future. Well, these people are thinking about the present. They don't have anything to eat today. So thinking about the future is sort of a very, very, I don't know, I don't want to use the Marxist words like bourgeois, but it is like that, thinking about the future. But the poor people are thinking about present. So regulation, again, as Marianne said, it has to really, really be well thought through. And these things are being debated in international, forums. So I don't know if my answer has satisfied you, Florian, but that's all I had to say to that. That we need efforts in multiple fronts.
If I may,
yes,
please add something to what you were saying, Professor Arijit, is it's a bit like diet. There is not one ingredient that we can eat all the time that will make us in good diet, right? We need to eat different type of things. Where to tackle climate change is a bit the same thing. We need to use different type of solutions to tackle it. There is not one ideal solution. Energy, it's a big one for sure. It's the biggest one, but it's not the only one that we need to focus on. Florian, I would say, if you want to have an impact that it's a bit bigger than that, what you see now is to look at solutions that exist and to inspire and convince people to focus on solutions that exist. Not to say what is bad, but to be a bit more optimistic and to focus on the solutions that exist.
Thanks, Brice. I'll just answer one more question from Yulia Damayanti, and then I'll let you three answer some of the others. So can you elaborate how investments categorized as Scope 3 emission? Well, investments are sort of from arm's length investments, right? I mean, we are all investors today, right? I mean, that's what it is. So where to keep your money? So you invest, because interest rates are close to zero. So and when we invest, all that matters is what the return, right? Who knows what the company is doing with that money, right? So, well, there are impact investments, and you will see that even hedge fund, even BlackRock CEO Larry Fink is talking about, that we must invest in green businesses and so on, right? But investments have, I mean, if you are not aware of how your money is being used, then it is Scope 3. Okay, because it is one step removed from what Scope 1 is what's happening inside your premises. Scope 2 includes your transportation and electricity usage, but Scope 3 is one step removed. So investment, of course, is in some cases it is many steps removed from and Singapore is being a financial hub. That's what happens, right? I mean, there are wealth management advisories, and there are, I think, about $3.5 trillion are managed from Singapore. Now, those assets, I mean, we don't know. I mean, what those how those assets are being managed, right? So it is definitely Scope 3. I don't know if I've answered your question. So that's all I had to say. I'll now let Marianne, Brice, and Irwan take away the other questions.
Yeah, if I may, there is one question from Douglas, which is very specific about how we, what applications do we have for the plastics, and whether or not Sphere can ensure full recyclability of those plastics. Well, I will be straightforward. The commercial applications that we have today is home compostable plastic film, which is used for your carrier bags that you would be using at NTUC today for those who are in Singapore, and any supermarkets for those who are in the rest of the world. Those bags are meant to be used to gather the organic wastes. And then the organic waste, and this is quite interesting because this goes with some initiative of Singapore to be more independent, can be used, for example, in Singapore, to create the compost which is necessary for the greenhouses where you grow your vegetables. And these applications are done in France, in many other countries, where basically they bring back the agriculture in the city centers. And for that, you need some nutriments, and those nutriments, you can find it in your consumer or your daily consumption. When it comes to the recyclability, yes, we have recyclability. Unfortunately, all plastic cannot be recycled. So if you look at, I would say, the circular economy of some plastics, one of the best way to get rid of it is to produce energy with it, which is the incineration. And incineration has bad publicity, but it's one of the most efficient way to produce energy. And it is untrue that it releases bad gases and so on if you are using the right filters. So there are solutions that exist today for that. And there's another way is, and this is also an initiative that has started this year in Singapore, where MNCs got together for the PET recycling, where the PET is these bottles, for the PET recycling, where these MNCs have signed up for one specialized recycler to come into the game and to recycle their PET to re-inject the same PET in the consumed product in Singapore. So there are a lot of solutions that exist. And again, as I just mentioned, it takes everybody to come around the table and to find solutions together. If Singapore needs for their greenhouses some efficient way to produce energy, they have ways. If they need more nutrients for their product, they don't have necessarily to import it, but they can get it from their own consumption, et cetera, et cetera. So there are many ways to tackle these consumer waste management. I hope I answered it.
Okay.
Yep. I'll take the question from Paul next. So the question is, the green plan looks applicable in Singapore thanks to its small size. Do you think that kind of plan could work in a bigger country? So the green plan, or at least an idea of some kind of plan or policy, I think this is something that not just Singapore, but countries across the world are exploring. If you look at Europe, for example, in fact, Europe has, I think, one of the most ambitious plans that I've seen. So it's called the European Green Deal. And like Singapore, it has framed the problem of sustainability in different lenses. So they are even looking at things like what's the chemical composition of products, what is allowed in the products that we consume, what is not allowed in those products. Things like what's the content of the fuels that we use, what's the regulations around packaging as well. So I think it's not so much a question of size, but that any policy, any plan needs to address the circumstances of the country and what is doable, what is not doable. So, like Awan was talking about agriculture, and in Europe, you have these schemes where there's a circularity around the agriculture. For Singapore, the 30 by 30 plan that we have for being more self-sufficient in terms of our calorific needs, that is very new. So we tackle that first part about figuring out how we're going to be meeting our calorific needs first. And then at the same time, we want to build some of these ideas of circularity in the plan as well, but it needs to come step by step. So definitely, I think it's something that countries across the world can tackle, but in its own way.
I would add one thing to it, because I think it's important for everybody to bear this in mind. Long time ago, when I was a student, one teacher told me, be careful, too much regulations will kill the regulation itself. Because at some points things cannot be done because it's too expensive or it's too much energy consumption, etc., etc. So we need to be very well aware that not everything is possible just with regulation, and pushing too far the regulations may kill the idea that we had at the beginning. So we need to bear this in mind in every aspect of our product development. For those who are doing some product development, we need to be aware of that.
Thanks.
There was
yes.
Yeah, there was a question from Maya. So Maya is probably an ESSEC student, and she said, could you perhaps, sorry, it was a question for me, could you perhaps talk more about your air consolidation, the impact it has had so far, and what's next? So this air consolidation specifically, so we are having it more and more around the globe. So now the focus is on having it in more and more countries, and we are also having it in Malaysia now. So we are very happy as well with this. The impact it has had is that we are able to basically equip a few thousands new aircon every month. So you can imagine that the impact is quite significant. And always so on average we save 25%, right, on aircon consumption. So it can give you an estimation on how big the impact can be. Now here in Singapore, we are having it into more and more companies, and we are also now working with BCA to have it certified, and so it will help us to have it more widely, I would say. And the goal is next is to have it into households, is to make it available for individuals. So this is what is next for us.
Okay. Thanks, Brice. I'll quickly answer. We're running out of time. So there are two questions from Tushar Poddar about the ozone layer. I'm not an expert on that, but what I recall is the ozone layer was about chlorofluorocarbons, and as far as I know, ozone layer does not have any impact on global warming. Okay. Now, coming to the other question about, this interesting question about scope 4 from JC. There is some talk today of scope 4 emissions that were avoided due to choices the organization has made. Where do you see this going? This is controversial. This is like the idea of additionality, that I could be a bad person, but I am not. So this is very difficult to measure. It's like saying, I could really do a lot of harm, but see, I haven't done it. So I think it would be very difficult to quantify that. So that's the problem with carbon credits, the whole debate around carbon credits, that a business is doing, creating global warming like nobody's business, and then buying some credits from somewhere to offset it. So that's why there's need for very, very intelligent and regulation. So that the overall idea is to control the carbon emissions. Okay, I'll stop there and then let you answer this question from Stefan about, I think it was to all of us, about the increasing use of internet, carbon use in the internet world. So please feel free to answer that.
Sorry, so maybe because in the interest of time, let's all move on to one last question. And so this is actually addressed to all speakers. So Professor Erwan, Brice, and Marianne, please feel free to give your inputs. So from Stephanie, what are your views on how the increasing carbon use of the internet world, which seems to grow exponentially, can be tackled? So maybe we can start off with Erwan, please.
Well, you're asking me an impossible question, because this will answer some other questions that were not answered yet. We are saying that we need more tracking in our logistics and in our supply chain. The thing is, more tracking means more blockchain. More blockchain means more energy consumptions, et cetera, et cetera. So as Professor said, the question is not how we tackle or how do we eliminate this issue, is how we better control and how we optimize our consumption of energy necessary for this part. That would be my point of view, because we cannot do without now. We have to go on with it, and if we use it right, it should help us. That's my point of view.
Thank you so much, everyone. Maybe Brice, you can share your thoughts on the question.
Yeah, to me, there are I would say several ways. Well, one is reduce somehow. It's also, as Erwan explained, very hard to do. Then another way to see it is, why is it a problem? Because the energy coming from the energy that we use for the internet, it's coming from carbon, right? So it's to change the source of energy, which is also very hard in Singapore. If we talk about Singapore itself, it's very hard, and there is a good documentation you can find online that explain why Singapore is hard, and I know Singapore is working on this. And then we need to live with it, right? Exactly as Erwan mentioned. So I would say try to limit, and then you can work on finding solutions on your own as well, as I believe there are tons of solutions that we haven't found yet. The solutions that we provide are only few. I believe there are many that can be found. Erwan mentioned that we need to do a lot more in terms of R&D, and I agree. So I believe there are many solutions that we can find along the way, at the same time that we improve the way we use internet.
Thank you so much, Brice. Marianne, you can share your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's also, I also think it's an optimization problem that we have, because I mean, for example, the fact that we're doing this webinar on video conference and not, for example, I'm based in Paris and me not flying back to Singapore, taking a 14-hour flight to be with you all. You know, I think we have, I have saved quite a bit of my carbon budget there. But then I think there are some concrete steps that we can take to address the issue. So one is, you know, for example, looking at price signals. And I recall seeing an article about 2 days ago about, you know, Professor talked about Bitcoin mining, cryptocurrency earlier. So the US is actually looking into what is the environmental impact on Bitcoin mining, because that is, in all the ways that we use the internet, it is one of the ways that, you know, really uses quite a lot of electricity. The other thing that we can think about also is how can we, you know, optimize the software that we use. And I know this is something that software companies are already looking into, looking at how they structure their code in the first place, because by changing the way that our software is designed, we can also optimize the way how much energy we use. So some concrete examples there that we can actually work on, but I agree, at the end of the day, it's about making those trade-offs and making sure that people are informed of their decisions. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marianne. So Professor, any last closing thoughts and closing statements?
Thank you. So I'll be very short. So I'll just throw a book at you. I mean, this is called How Bad Are Bananas? Can you see it? By Mike Berners-Lee. So it's a fantastic book. It talks about the carbon footprint of mundane things like sending an email, which takes less than 10 grams of carbon, and then goes on to the carbon footprint of a war. So you can actually see, as I said, the reason why I showed the cause and effect diagram is it is about physics and chemistry. It doesn't matter what human beings, what stories human beings are making inside their minds. That's once we understand that, then everything else will be very clear. Whether we're right wing or left wing, whether we support regulation or free trade, or all of that will go away, because it is about physics and chemistry. I do not have any opinion on gravity, because I dare not try it, because the moment I do, I'll fall, and I'll break my leg, or I'll be dead. So it's like that. So when we understand that global warming is about physics and chemistry, then everything else will be crystal clear. It doesn't matter whether we have to inspire or whether we have to be positive or negative. That's my take on things, because I mean, as I said, it is about that. So I suggest, as somebody talked about what books, some names of books. So this is a good book. You can buy it, or better if you can download a PDF file, so that you don't have to pay for the travel, the carbon footprint of this, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor. Thank you for the great introduction to the book. So with that last question that has been answered, we would now like to conclude this Zoom session on this topic of sustainability. So thank you very much to Professor for joining us today for the very informative conversation. Thank you to our speakers, Marianne, Brice, Erwan, for joining us, sharing your thoughts in such an interesting topic. And a huge shout out to both ESSEC and French Chambers of Commerce Singapore for partnering with us for this event. And thank you to our audience for your active participation. So to close up, do join us next Thursday for a webinar organized by the Singapore Embassy in Berlin on COVID-19, the latest on vaccines, booster shots, and Omicron. And finally, we'd love to get your feedback for this session. So here's a QR code that will take you right to our survey. We have also shared a link in the function chat function if that is easier for you. It will go just a short while, but will go a long way. It will just take a short while, but will go a long way in helping us do better for our future events. Thank you so much. So we have now come to the end of our session. On behalf of SGN, ESSEC, and French Chambers of Commerce in Singapore, thank you for tuning in, and stay safe, everyone. We hope to see you again.